Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Before I dive into today's stories, I want to say, disclaimer. The content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. As someone who's constantly hunting for ways to supplement my income, I often find myself scrolling through odd job listings on various websites. One evening, while sifting through a less than reputable job board that I stumbled upon via a curious click, I found a posting that caught my eye. Urgent. Overnight babysitter needed. What made it unusual was its mention of substantial compensation and a location ideal for those seeking solitude. Desperate for cash, I ignored the vague discomfort in my gut and replied to the ad. The response was almost immediate. A person named Alex instructed me to meet at a remote location, coordinates leading deep into the nearest forest. "You won't need to bring anything," the message detailed. "Just ensure you're not followed." Odd, I thought, but the promise of triple my usual rate convinced me to pack my bag. The drive was long and lonesome, stretching into the dusky veil of twilight. My GPS finally announced, "You have reached your destination," at an old dirt track veering off the main road. No houses were in sight, just dense forest swallowing up the path ahead. With trepidation, I followed the narrow dirt road until an old cabin materialized from the encroaching darkness. The cabin looked like something out of a quaint postcard, with its weathered timber and smoke curling up from the chimney. However, something felt unsettlingly off. The forest too silent, as if holding its breath. I knocked on the door, half expecting no answer. To my surprise, a tall, gaunt figure opened the door immediately. "You must be the babysitter," he said, his voice oddly neutral. "Come in." Inside, the cabin was rustic but well kept, with a cozy fire crackling in the hearth. Alex gestured toward a closed door on the ground floor. "The child is in there," he explained, handing me a walkie-talkie. "Keep this on you. If you need anything, I'll be in the barn out back." Before I could ask any questions, he added, "Oh, and one more thing. No need to open the door. Just listen for the baby. If it cries, use this walkie-talkie to inform me immediately." With that, Alex left, and the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was alone, in a remote cabin, tasked with listening for a baby I wasn't allowed to see. Curiosity gnawed at me, but the weight of Alex's stern instructions kept me rooted to the spot. Hours ticked by, and the only sounds were the occasional crackle of firewood and the distant rustling of leaves. Suddenly, a soft whimper echoed through the walkie-talkie. Not a baby's cry, but something else, something unsettling. It sounded almost human, but distorted like a recording played backward. My heart thudded in my chest as I pressed the talk button. "Alex, the baby. It's crying," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief silence before Alex's voice crackled through, calm as ever. "Thank you. Just keep listening. Let me know if it changes." As the night deepened, so did the sounds. The cries grew more frequent, less human, more desperate. I found myself pacing by the door, every fiber of my being screaming to look inside, yet the fear of the unknown and Alex's instructions held me back. By dawn, the sounds had stopped, and Alex returned. He looked neither tired nor concerned as he handed me an envelope thick with cash. "Thank you," he said simply. "Your service is appreciated." As I drove back down the forest road, the sun peeking through the trees, the normalcy of daylight did little to ease the chill of what I had experienced. I couldn't help but wonder what was behind that door. Was it even a child at all? My mind raced with questions, but deep down, I knew some jobs were better left unquestioned. As I reached the main road, I promised myself never to take another job from the dark web, no matter the pay. The drive home was filled with an unnerving quiet that my mind struggled to fill with normal thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of that locked door and the strange, distorted sounds that had emanated from behind it. The substantial sum of cash that now sat in the passenger seat beside me felt less like a reward and more like hush money. A couple of days passed and I tried to resume my normal routine, but curiosity and concern gnawed at me. I realized I needed answers. I had to know what was behind that door, not just for my peace of mind, but perhaps for the safety of whatever or whoever was in that room. With a resolve bolstered by daylight and the busy sounds of the city, I decided to return to the cabin. This time I approached the journey with a sense of purpose. As I navigated the familiar roads leading back into the forest, I rehearsed what I would say to Alex, how I would demand answers. However, upon arriving, the cabin seemed different, more isolated than I remembered, as if the forest itself had grown closer, its trees leaning in with silent, watchful intent. With no sign of Alex or anyone else, I cautiously approached the cabin. The front door was unlocked, a detail that struck me as both an invitation and a warning. The inside of the cabin was silent, the fire unlit, the atmosphere heavy with the sort of stillness that speaks of hurried departures. My heart pounding, I walked directly to the room where I'd spent that eerie night listening to the unnerving sounds. This time, the door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, I braced myself for anything. The room was surprisingly ordinary, almost disappointingly so. It was a nursery with pale blue walls, plush toys, and a crib. The only thing out of place was a small, sophisticated-looking speaker system installed in the corner. As I inspected it, I realized that it could play sounds from an external source. Was this the source of the cries I heard? Feeling a mix of relief and confusion, I searched the cabin for any clues. In Alex's room, I found a stack of papers on his desk, receipts, notes, and a faded photograph of what looked like him with a woman and a child. The notes were frantic, filled with mentions of experiments, treatments, and a failure to cure. It painted a picture of desperation, of a last-ditch effort to cling to something lost. On my way out, I noticed something on the living room table that I hadn't seen before. A child's drawing, crayon scribbles that seemed innocuous at first glance. But as I looked closer, the scribbles formed a word: help. Shaken, I left the cabin with the drawing and papers in hand, the eerie silence of the forest pressing in on me from all sides. As I drove away, the weight of what I'd discovered lay heavy on my chest. This wasn't just a simple babysitting job, it was someone's broken attempt at healing or hiding from reality. Back home, I mulled over how to proceed. Who would believe this story? The police. Would they take seriously a tale spun from a dark web job listing? I decided I needed to investigate further. I had to find out who the woman and child in the photograph were and what had happened to them. The thought of returning to that cabin filled me with dread. But I knew that whatever Alex was trying to hide might still need help. And if I didn't try to uncover the truth, who would? After leaving the cabin, the drive back to the city seemed to stretch on interminably, the normalcy of the passing scenery at odds with the turmoil in my thoughts. With the child's drawing and the scattered notes I'd found, my mission was clear: uncover the identities of the woman and child in the photograph and determine their connection to Alex. Once home, I spread out the documents and photograph on my kitchen table. The receipts provided clues: pharmacy bills for medications unfamiliar to me, and a series of payments to a research facility. The notes, though scribbled in haste, mentioned a place called Hawthorne Institute. A quick online search revealed it was a private research center focusing on neurological diseases, located not too far away. The next day, with the drawing and the photograph safely tucked in my bag, I drove to the institute. The building was modern, the glass facade reflecting the bright, unyielding sun. Inside, I was met with the sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft murmur of hushed conversations. I approached the reception, showing the receptionist the photograph and asking about the woman and child. The receptionist's eyes flicked over the photo with a glint of recognition, but her face quickly settled into a practiced neutrality. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out personal information about our patients," she said. But her slight pause, the brief hitch in her voice, told me I was on the right track. Undeterred, I spent the next few hours in a nearby coffee shop, watching the comings and goings at the Institute. It was there that I saw her, the woman from the photograph. She walked out of the Institute, her face tired and worried, clutching similar paperwork to what I'd found in Alex's cabin. I followed her at a distance until she reached a small park. There, she sat down on a bench, her shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the world. Gathering my courage, I approached her, introduced myself, and showed her the drawing in the photograph. Her eyes widened with a mix of fear and relief as she looked at the items. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I explained how I'd found them and about the job I'd taken, leaving out the more unsettling details to spare her additional worry. "I just want to help," I finished, hoping my sincerity came through. The woman, whose name was Sarah, took a deep breath before she began to share her story. Her son Michael had been diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder. Alex, her husband, had become obsessed with curing their son, pouring every resource into experimental treatments that promised a glimmer of hope. As his desperation grew, so did his isolation from Sarah and Michael. "Alex took Michael one day saying he'd found a new treatment that could save him," Sarah continued, her voice cracking with the strain of her recollections. "That was the last time I saw them. I've been trying to find them ever since." My heart ached for her, and the pieces of this tragic puzzle began to fit together. The job listing, the cabin, the sophisticated speaker setup. It was all Alex's doing, an attempt to manage something beyond his grasp. "I need to find them," Sarah said, a determined glint in her eyes. "Please, will you help me?" I nodded, unable to say no. What had started as a simple job had become a quest for answers, for healing a family torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Together, Sarah and I planned our next steps, knowing the journey would be difficult, but necessary. As we parted ways that day, the weight of the task ahead felt daunting, yet there was a new thread of hope. Whatever Alex was hiding at that cabin, I was determined to help bring it into the light. Not just for the money, but for Sarah and for Michael, whatever his condition might be now. With a newfound resolve, Sarah and I set out to piece together Alex's whereabouts. Each clue we uncovered seemed to solidify the grim reality of Alex's desperate venture into uncharted medical territory. Armed with Sarah's intimate knowledge of Alex's habits and the scant breadcrumbs he'd left behind, we narrowed our search to areas likely used for his increasingly clandestine activities. Our break came from a local who recognized Alex from a photo. He mentioned a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town that Alex had been frequenting, always late at night, always alone. Driven by the urgency of our mission, Sarah and I decided to investigate the warehouse under the cover of dusk. The warehouse was an imposing structure, silhouetted against the fading twilight, its metal siding rusted, and windows boarded up. It stood alone, an island amidst a sea of overgrown weeds. The air held a chill as we approached, the silence broken only by the distant call of a night bird. Our steps were cautious, each carrying the weight of the unknown. Inside, the vast space was cluttered with medical equipment, papers, and computer screens displaying streams of data. The air was stale, thick with the scent of metal and old wood. In the center, a makeshift lab had been set up, illuminated by the harsh light of fluorescent bulbs. It was here that we found Alex. He was engrossed in his work, not noticing our arrival until we were nearly upon him. When he finally looked up, his eyes betrayed a mixture of fear and relief. "Sarah," he breathed, a complex web of emotions crossing his face. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the palpable tension. "Alex, where is Michael? What have you been doing here?" Alex's shoulders slumped, the fight seemingly draining out of him. "I had to try," he said simply, gesturing around at the lab. The treatments at the institute, they weren't enough. I found something new, something that could really help him. As he spoke, he led us to a small adjacent room. There, surrounded by comforting drawings and his favorite toys, was Michael. He looked peaceful, asleep on a small bed. The room was warm, a stark contrast to the cold sterility of the rest of the warehouse. "He's been responding," Alex continued, his voice cracking with hope and fatigue. "It's slow, but I believe it's working." The sight of Michael, so much like any other child at rest, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She rushed to him, her actions a mixture of a mother's love and a fierce need for reassurance. I watched as a family found a moment of peace in the midst of chaos. My role, once that of a simple bystander, had morphed into that of a catalyst for this reunion. As Sarah and Alex talked, their voices a mixture of sorrow and tentative hope, I stepped back, knowing my part was nearly done. Our return to normalcy was slow but inevitable. Alex agreed to cease his solitary efforts, collaborating instead with specialists who could oversee Michael's treatment with the care and ethical consideration it required. The authorities were understanding, more concerned with Michael's welfare than with punitive measures. As for me, I returned to my life with a story that few would believe, and a sense of closure that not every job ended when you walked away. This one had changed lives, mine included, teaching me the value of perseverance, the depths of parental love, and the strange ways we sometimes have to navigate to find the light. Reflecting on everything, I realized that while the dark web had been the catalyst, the true journey was about far more than just a babysitting job. It was about how far we go for the ones we love, and the unexpected heroes we can become in the lives of others, even when the road there is as twisted as the darkest forest path. Months passed since the night at the warehouse. In the quiet aftermath, life slowly began to weave back into a pattern of normalcy. The dark web job that had spiraled into an unforeseen journey had now settled into a silent memory, a chapter that was difficult to revisit, yet impossible to forget. Michael was improving, thanks to the collaborative efforts of specialized doctors who continued the treatment Alex had started. They used the research he had done as a foundation, refining it with ethical practices and medical oversight. The updates I received from Sarah were filled with hope and gratitude, each one a testament to the resilience of a child and the relentless spirit of a family reunited. As for Alex, he found his redemption in cooperation. His initial missteps, driven by desperation and love, were now channeled into assisting research efforts. His intimate understanding of Michael's condition and his first-hand experiences provided invaluable insights that combined empathy with science. One sunny afternoon, I visited them. The sight of Michael playing in the yard, his laughter a sweet melody against the backdrop of a gentle breeze, was a stark contrast to the image of the child I had imagined behind the locked door of that remote cabin. Sarah and Alex greeted me with warm smiles, the kind that spoke volumes of their journey through shadows to this moment of light. We sat under the shade of an old oak tree, cups of lemonade sweating in the summer heat, and talked about everything and nothing. Occasionally, our conversation would drift to that night, but it was no longer with a sense of foreboding. Instead, it was discussed with a reflective tone, analyzing steps and decisions, contemplating the what-ifs, and acknowledging the growth that came from them. "It's strange," Alex said during one of these moments, his gaze following Michael's movements. "How something so terrifying at the time can lead to so much good. I regret how I went about it, but I can't regret the outcome." Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. "We were lost for a while, weren't we? But finding our way back to each other, to here," she paused, gesturing around. "It wouldn't have happened without you stepping in when you did." Their words filled me with a bittersweet joy. My role in their story was accidental, yet pivotal. As the afternoon waned into evening, I took my leave, the image of their happy, bustling family imprinting a warm glow in my heart. Driving home, I thought about the unexpected turns life could take. The dark web, a place synonymous with shadows and dangers, had led me to a role in a family's healing. It underscored a profound truth I had learned. Light could be found in the darkest of places, and sometimes the most circuitous paths led to the brightest outcomes. As the city lights began to twinkle in the twilight, I felt a sense of closure. The story that had started with a simple click had changed several lives, including my own. It was a reminder of the unpredictable nature of life, the complexity of human emotions, and the incredible power of hope and determination. In the quiet solitude of my apartment, I penned down the last of my experiences, a personal account meant to capture the essence of this unexpected journey. It was a tale of darkness and light, of fear and bravery, of desperation and love. And as I typed the final words, I realized that this story, like all stories, was a bridge connecting the unseen depths of human experiences with the universal quest for happiness and peace. I shared the story online, not under the shadowy veils of anonymity, but with a hope that it might inspire others to believe in the possibility of redemption and the power of second chances. The responses were overwhelming, each comment a thread in the rich tapestry of shared human experiences. Each reader another witness to the tale of a babysitting job that was anything but ordinary. I've always been a curious guy, maybe too curious for my own good. My friends used to say I should have been a detective. I guess that's why I ended up on the dark web. Not for anything nefarious, but just to see if the stories were true. Let me tell you something. Some doors are better left unopened. It all started innocently enough. I stumbled upon a forum that claimed they could track anyone's location. Just out of morbid curiosity, I decided to try it. I mean, who wouldn't want to know if it was really possible, right? I thought about tracking a celebrity or a fictional character, but ultimately, I keyed in an old friend's details from college to see if he'd moved from his last known address. The website looked like it hadn't seen a design update since the early 2000s, with a plain black background and neon green text. It was the kind of place you could smell the danger, but the thrill of the chase clouded my better judgment. After entering his name and last known location, the site churned for a bit before spitting out coordinates that were indeed in the city where he now lived, according to his social media updates. It was creepy, yet fascinating. But here's where things took a turn. A pop-up appeared on the screen, flashing in red. "Your turn!" I clicked it away, figuring it was just another ad. But that's when my computer froze. After a tense minute, it shut down completely. When I finally got it to reboot, there was a new icon on my desktop labeled, "Watch Me." Curiosity killed the cat, or so they say. I opened the file, only to be met with a live feed of my own living room. The timestamp in the corner of the video was in real time. My stomach turned as I realized that while I had been tracking my friend, someone had hacked into my system and was now watching me. I covered my webcam with a piece of tape and started searching online for any kind of explanation or solution. That's when I found out that the site was notorious, not just for tracking, but for pulling its users into a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Apparently, once you use their service, they tag you as a player in their sick game. The next day, things escalated. I received an email with no subject line, and out of habit, I opened it. The message was chillingly simple. "You're it. Game on." Attached was a list, and my name was at the bottom. Above it were several others, marked in red. I didn't know them, but a quick search revealed a disturbing pattern. All of them had either disappeared or met untimely deaths under mysterious circumstances. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. And the so-called hit list wasn't just a game, it was a countdown, and my name was on it. As I sit here typing this out, I know I need to find a way out. I've gone to the police, but without tangible threats against me, they can't do much. I'm turning to you, the internet, for help. If anyone knows how to disappear from a digital hit list, please tell me. Because every click, every turn of my head, I feel like I'm stepping closer to a fate I can't escape. The realization that I was on a digital hit list forced me to change my daily routine drastically. I started using different routes every day for my morning jog, avoided frequenting my usual coffee shop, and became wary of any unfamiliar faces in my neighborhood. It might sound like an overreaction, but when your name appears on a list linked to disappearances, caution becomes your best friend. But as days turned into weeks without incident, my initial panic began to wane. That was until I received a mysterious package at my doorstep. No return address, just a small, unassuming box. Inside, there was a burner phone and a note that read, "Keep this on you. We'll call with instructions." The rational part of me wanted to throw it away, report it to the police, or destroy it. But another part, the part that kept pulling me back to this mess, wanted answers. I charged the phone, half expecting it to blow up or further invade my privacy, but it remained silent, almost mocking me with its presence. A few days later, the phone finally rang. The voice on the other end was distorted, robotic almost, making it impossible to identify. Go to the public library, find the book The Art of War by Sun Tzu, page 42. That's where you'll find your next clue. You have 2 hours. Don't be late. The task seemed bizarre, almost like something out of a spy movie, but what choice did I have? I went to the library, found the book, and turned to page 42. There, neatly folded, was a photograph of a park bench. Nothing else. Just an ordinary bench in what looked like a nearby park. The game was becoming more intricate, and with each step I felt further from understanding who was behind this or why. I headed to the park, finding the bench from the photograph. Underneath, taped to the seat, was another note. "Watch the ducks. One of them carries your fate." As I sat there, watching families feed the ducks, feeling the sun on my face, I wondered if this was all some elaborate prank. Then, my focus shifted to a group of ducks near the edge of the pond. One had a small blue plastic band around its leg. Approaching cautiously, I managed to catch the duck. It didn't even resist. Sliding off the band, I found a USB drive inside. I needed a secure, anonymous way to check its contents, wary of plugging it into my own computer. So, I went to an internet cafe, used a privacy screen, and braced myself. The drive contained a single file, a video of a hooded figure. "Congratulations on making it this far," the figure began. "But the game is only just beginning. Your curiosity led you here, but it's your wit that will keep you alive. Be ready for our next call." As I left the cafe, the weight of the situation settled in. This wasn't just digital anymore. It was real, and it was happening to me. I was part of a game I never wanted to play, and the next move was not mine to make. The days following the strange encounter with the video and the hooded figure were filled with anxiety and confusion. I kept the burner phone close, half dreading, half anticipating its ring. It was a peculiar feeling, wanting answers, yet fearing them at the same time. Late one Thursday evening, as I was attempting to distract myself with a book, the phone buzzed violently against my wooden coffee table. The message was brief: "Look outside your window." Heart pounding, I peered through the curtains. Parked across the street was a familiar car, one I hadn't seen since college. It was my old friend, the one I initially searched for on that fateful dark website. I rushed outside, confronting him as he stepped out of the car. "What's going on? Why are you here?" His face was fraught with worry, a stark contrast to the easygoing friend I remembered. "It's a long story," he said, "but it looks like we're both in trouble. Can we talk inside?" Once settled on the couch, he spilled everything. After I had used that tracking site, he began receiving threatening emails and noticed odd occurrences. His trash rummaged through, late-night phone calls, cryptic messages left in his mailbox. It was as if someone was trying to scare him into paranoia. I started digging, he continued, and it turns out we're part of a much bigger game. That site you used, it's linked to a group that enjoys manipulating people. They create scenarios that push people to their limits, just to see how they react. The gravity of his words sank in. We were not just randomly selected victims, we were chosen participants in a twisted experiment. So, what do we do now? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. We need to figure out who they are and what they want, he said. And for that, I need your help. They're watching me too closely now, but you might still have a chance to get close to them. He left me with a plan. We would communicate only through encrypted messages and meet in person only when absolutely necessary. The first step was to trace the origins of the website that started it all. I had some skills in coding and cybersecurity, which suddenly felt like the only tools I had against an unseen adversary. The next few days were spent in front of my computer, lines of code scrolling past as I attempted to backtrack the site's IP address and uncover any associated identities. It was a deep dive into a world I barely understood, but with each piece of information, I felt a step closer to understanding our tormentors. Meanwhile, life seemed to continue around me. People went about their daily routines, unaware of the digital curtain I had peeked behind. It gave me a sense of isolation, like I was living in a parallel world where danger lurked in the shadows of ordinary life. Finally, after countless hours of searching, a breakthrough, an encrypted file buried within the site's server, labeled simply, Players. It was heavily protected, but it was a start, a clue to potentially unraveling who was behind this nightmare. With the encrypted file titled Players now in my possession, the stakes felt higher than ever. I knew I was delving into something that was meant to stay hidden, yet the truth seemed just within reach. My friend and I had decided that understanding our adversaries was key to freeing ourselves from their game. Decrypting the file proved to be a daunting task. It was protected by layers of security that would make a government hacker proud. Each layer I peeled back revealed another, more complex than the last. It was like a digital labyrinth, with each turn bringing me closer to the heart of the mystery. One night, as I was about to give up for the evening, a breakthrough came. The file began to decrypt, the progress bar slowly creeping forward as the algorithms did their work. What I found inside was chilling, not in the bone-cold sense, but in its implications. The document contained names, dozens of them, each accompanied by dates, locations, and a brief description of the game they had been a part of. It was horrifying to see how many people had been unknowingly dragged into this twisted experiment. But more importantly, there were notes on the outcomes, comments on how each person had reacted to the scenarios they were thrust into. I searched for my name, finding it alongside a recent date and a note. Subject shows high resilience and curiosity, ideal for final stage. Final stage? The words echoed in my mind, a dire prediction of what might come next. As I delved deeper into the document, I found references to a shadowy group known only as the Observers. They were the ones running the show, a cabal of individuals who seemed to thrive on the chaos and fear they created. Their goal, it seemed, was to study human behavior under extreme stress, all for some unknown, possibly malevolent purpose. Determined to find more about these observers, I set up a series of safe searches and traps in the digital world, hoping to lure one of them into revealing themselves. Days passed with little to no activity, but then a ping on one of my traps. Someone had taken the bait. A meeting was arranged, not in person, but through a secure video link. The figure who appeared was masked, voice distorted, but the setting looked eerily familiar. A room filled with monitors, each displaying different parts of people's lives. It was like looking into the nerve center of a surveillance operation. "We've been impressed with your progress," the figure began, their tone almost congratulatory. Not many make it this far. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's simple," the figure replied. "Humanity is at a crossroads. We need to understand what makes people tick, what drives them to survive, to fight. You, and others like you, are helping us to build a new world." Their words made my skin crawl, not from fear but from anger. They saw us as nothing more than lab rats in their grand experiment. The conversation ended with a warning. "Continue playing, and you might just make it out. But remember, we are always watching." As I turned off the screen, my resolve hardened. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't just about escaping their game anymore. It was about exposing them, bringing down their network of manipulation and fear. Armed with the knowledge of the observers and their manipulative games, I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. I had gone from a curious bystander to an unwilling participant, and now I was ready to take them down. My friend and I prepared meticulously, knowing that whatever we did next had to not only expose them, but also protect us and potentially others from further harm. We decided the best course of action was to leak everything we had discovered to the public. Transparency was our shield against the shadows. I compiled all the evidence, anonymized data to protect the innocent, and prepared it for release. We planned a coordinated dump across multiple platforms to ensure it couldn't be easily silenced. The night before the release, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and sigh of my house seemed amplified, as though the observers knew what we were planning and were closing in. But the sun rose without incident, and with a deep breath we set our plan into motion. The impact was immediate and explosive. Forums, news sites, and social media erupted with the details of the dark web games. People were outraged, sympathetic, and above all engaged. The story spread like wildfire, sparking debates about privacy, consent, and the ethical limits of observational studies. Within hours, I received a call from an unknown number. Expecting a threat or another cryptic message, I was surprised to hear a reporter on the other end asking for a statement. It was clear the issue was gaining traction, and the observers' anonymity was crumbling. The media's spotlight was something they hadn't anticipated, and it was turning into our best weapon against them. However, with exposure came danger. We heightened our security, used our digital skills to shield our whereabouts, and stayed vigilant. Days turned into weeks, and the fervor around the story started to foster real change. Investigations were launched, and slowly, the network the observers had built began to unravel. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest updates on the case, the burner phone rang one last time. A different voice this time, one tinged with resignation. "You've changed the game," it said simply. And then the line went dead. The observers were backing off, their experiment disrupted beyond continuation. In the months that followed, we learned that several key figures within the observers were arrested, their operations dismantled. Laws and regulations concerning digital privacy and experimentation tightened, and the dark web became a little less dark. As for me, my life eventually found its way back to a new normal. The paranoia faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. I still share my story, not just as a warning about the dangers of curiosity in the dark web, but as a reminder of the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what's right. Last Thursday seemed like any other day. I had just wrapped up another monotonous shift at work, and as per my routine, I plopped down in front of my computer to scour the internet for something, anything, to break the monotony. That's when I stumbled across an old forum post on a niche dark website known for its coordinates to forgotten places. The post was vague, just a string of GPS coordinates with the title, "Do Not Enter." Naturally, my curiosity was piqued. Armed with nothing but my phone, a flashlight, and an overwhelming sense of amateur adventure, I decided to see what was at those coordinates. The location was surprisingly close, just a couple of hours' drive from my small town. The drive was serene, a complete contrast to the unsettling destination I would soon discover. I parked my car near the wooded entry point as the sun began its descent, cloaking the sky in shades of orange and purple. A 20-minute hike through the dense forest brought me to a rusted metal hatch, half buried in the underbrush, a remnant of a world long forgotten. The air was heavy with the scent of moss and damp earth as I cleared the debris with my hands, revealing a padlock that had long ago succumbed to rust. A few firm hits with a rock, and the lock gave way, creaking open to invite me into the darkness below. Descending the metal ladder, the air grew cooler and the silence of the bunker enveloped me. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing a corridor lined with old pipes and fading warning signs. It was clear no one had set foot here for decades. The bunker unfolded like a labyrinth, with corridors branching off into the darkness. As I ventured deeper, I came across a heavy steel door, ajar, and leading into what looked like a main research area. The room was a time capsule of sorts, filled with old computer equipment, scattered documents, and a thick layer of dust covering everything. What caught my eye, though, were the large glass enclosures lining the back wall. Inside each, preserved in a formaldehyde-like solution, were creatures that defied explanation, grotesque parodies of human form. Their elongated limbs and sunken eyes suggested they were once subjects of bizarre experiments, perhaps an attempt to cross the boundaries of known science. I felt a profound sadness, standing there in the dim light, pondering the fate of these forgotten beings. There were no chains or signs of escape. It was as if everything was abruptly left behind, sealed off from the world. The documents scattered about hinted at the urgency of vacating the bunker, with phrases like immediate evacuation and protocol breach scribbled across the papers. Curiosity drove me deeper, urging me to understand the purpose of this clandestine research. I sifted through the paperwork, piecing together a narrative of scientific ambition that spiraled into chaos. The researchers, under directives from an unnamed authority, were pushing the limits of genetic engineering. They seemed motivated by a combination of fear and a desire to pioneer a scientific breakthrough. As I delved deeper into the papers, a picture began to form. A project aimed at enhancing human capabilities, possibly for military purposes, which took a wrong turn. The creatures were perhaps once human, now nothing more than reminders of human error and hubris. Feeling the weight of what I had uncovered, I realized that this place was meant to remain hidden, a chapter of history too dark to be revisited. I decided it was time to leave, to let the shadows reclaim what was theirs. As I retraced my steps back to the ladder, I couldn't help but feel that some secrets are better left buried. As I emerged back into the night air, the bunker behind me felt less like a discovery and more like a warning, a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. The drive home was reflective and quiet. I resolved to share this story not to sensationalize, but to acknowledge that in our quest for knowledge, we must never lose sight of our humanity. Back home, the imagery of what I had discovered refused to leave the forefront of my thoughts. The tranquility of my own space stood in stark contrast to the eerie silence of the bunker. Despite my resolve to let the past remain hidden, my curiosity was not satiated. Part of me needed to understand more, to connect the dots of this shadowed history. I spread out the papers I had taken from the lab across my kitchen table, a makeshift research station under the bright light. The documents were a mix of scientific logs, personal journals, and official communications, all hinting at escalating concerns over the experiments. It was evident that the project started with high hopes and substantial backing. Mentions of unprecedented potential and revolutionizing human capabilities were frequent in the earlier entries. However, as I flipped through more pages, the tone shifted dramatically. Excitement turned into apprehension and then into outright alarm. One journal entry in particular caught my eye. It was from Dr. Helena Weiss, one of the lead researchers. Her handwriting, once neat and precise, grew shaky towards the last entries. "We've gone too far," she wrote. What we intended as a leap forward for humanity has twisted into something unrecognizable. The subjects are no longer who they once were. We can't control it, and I fear what it means for all of us if it ever gets out. As I pieced together her entries with the official logs, a narrative emerged. The project aimed to enhance human abilities to superhuman levels. Initially, the progress was promising, with successful trials and jubilant reports. But as they began to alter more significant aspects of human physiology, the side effects became unpredictable. The subjects began to show physical deformities and severe psychological shifts, effects that were grossly underestimated at the project's inception. Amid the chaos of scientific discovery gone awry, I found references to a Protocol 19, a contingency plan for a catastrophic failure. The details were scarce, but it involved sealing the lab and all its contents as a last resort. A chilling realization dawned on me: the bunker was not meant to be reopened. With this understanding, a sense of responsibility began to gnaw at me. The more I learned, the more I felt compelled to share this story, to ensure that such errors were not repeated. However, sharing such information came with its own moral quandaries. Was it right to unveil a story that could incite fear or controversy? Determined to find more answers, I decided that my next step would be to track down Dr. Weiss or any surviving members of the research team. Perhaps they could provide the closure needed not only for the unfortunate souls who became subjects, but for the project's haunting legacy. My plan was clear. I would search for them under the light of day, hopeful to bring some peace to this story. As night stretched into the early hours of the morning, I organized the documents back into my briefcase, my mind racing with the implications of my next steps. Despite the unsettling nature of my discovery, a deeper understanding of these events was crucial, not just for my own peace of mind, but for the broader implications it held about the boundaries of human scientific pursuit. With the first light of dawn, my resolve solidified, ready to confront whatever truths lay ahead. The search for Dr. Helena Weiss or any of her colleagues proved more daunting than I anticipated. The names listed in the documents were either too common to pinpoint or led to dead ends. After several hours scouring social media and professional networking sites, I decided to visit the local library to access archival newspapers and public records that might not be available online. The library's musty aisles and the soft murmur of turning pages created a calming environment, vastly different from the dark echoes of the bunker. With the help of a friendly librarian who took a keen interest in genealogy, I dove into microfilm archives, hoping to find mentions of the project or its researchers in local news from decades past. After what felt like endless scanning of old newsprint, a small article in the corner of a 1984 newspaper caught my eye. It was a report on a sudden closure of a government-funded facility due to unforeseen circumstances. The article was brief, with no mention of the research specifics, but it listed a public press contact, Dr. Helena Weiss. Accompanying the article was a faded photograph of a young Dr. Weiss, a stark contrast to the desperate tone of her last journal entries. Feeling a renewed sense of direction, I took a digital photo of the article and the contact information it provided. My next step was clear. I needed to find out more about this press contact, hoping it would lead me to Dr. Weiss or her family. Back home, I dialed the number from the article, fully expecting it to be disconnected. To my surprise, it rang. After several tones, a frail, cautious voice answered. It was Dr. Weiss herself. She had changed her number many times since the 80s, but something compelled her to keep this one active, perhaps a lingering connection to her past. Dr. Weiss was initially reluctant to speak about the project, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and regret. However, as I shared my discoveries and intentions, her tone softened, replaced by a weary resignation. She agreed to meet, suggesting a quiet cafe in town where we could talk discreetly. The next morning, under the gray sweep of an overcast sky, I met Dr. Weiss. Age had bent her frame, but her eyes still held a sharp, discerning light. Over cups of tepid coffee, she began to unravel the story she had carried like a heavy shroud for so many years. Dr. Weiss explained that the project was born out of a desperate period in scientific research, where ethical lines were blurred in the race for advancements. The subjects, initially volunteers desperate for money, were not fully informed of the risks. As the experiments progressed, the transformations became profound and irreversible. When the side effects became too severe, the project was abruptly shut down, the bunker sealed, and the research classified. The world wasn't ready for what we discovered, and we weren't prepared to deal with the consequences, she said, her voice a mix of sorrow and caution. I've lived with this guilt every day, hoping that those doors would remain closed forever. As our conversation drew to a close, Dr. Weiss handed me a small locked box. This contains my notes and recordings from those days, everything that led up to the sealing of the bunker. I'm entrusting this to you, she said, her eyes pleading. Use it not for sensationalism, but as a cautionary tale of what lies at the fringe of human curiosity. I left the cafe with the box, feeling the weight of responsibility. The story was no longer just a pursuit of curiosity, but a testament to the human cost of scientific ambition. I knew that sharing this would be delicate, balancing the need for truth with the potential impact of its revelations. With Dr. Weiss's locked box in my possession, I felt a mix of apprehension and duty as I returned home. The box was old, its metal corners worn and the lock tarnished, but it felt like it contained more than just physical artifacts. It held the weight of forgotten and regrettable history. Back at my desk with the box before me, I found the key taped to the underside of the lid. A small, thoughtful provision from Dr. Weiss. With a deep breath, I unlocked it, the click of the mechanism sounding unusually loud in the quiet of my room. Inside, I found a stack of notebooks, some reel-to-reel audio tapes, and a small black-and-white photo of the research team, smiling naively, unaware of the future they were barreling towards. I spent the next several days immersed in Dr. Weiss's notes and listening to the tapes. Her voice, much younger, but just as weighted by the gravity of her work, detailed their progress and the growing unease among the team. The recordings provided a candid backdrop to the written words, filled with the sounds of a busy lab and the occasional tense discussion about ethical boundaries. One tape in particular captured a pivotal meeting where the team debated the continuation of their research as adverse effects among the subjects began to surface. "We are playing with elements we don't fully understand," one voice argued, a note of desperation threading through his words. "What if we are creating something that can't be undone?" These materials painted a vivid picture of a group of brilliant minds caught in a whirlwind of scientific fervor, driven by the potential of their work, but increasingly haunted by the reality of their actions. It was a stark reminder of the thin line between innovation and recklessness. I knew that sharing this story would require care. It wasn't just a matter of revealing forgotten horrors. It was about fostering a discussion on the limits of human pursuit and the ethics of scientific experimentation. I began organizing the materials, planning how best to present them. I reached out to a local university, offering to donate the box to their archives with the condition that they use it to educate on the ethics of research. They agreed, seeing the value in such a real-world example. With the university's help, I arranged a small exhibition, inviting academics, students, and the public to view the contents of the box and listen to excerpts from the tapes. The exhibition included panels discussing the history of scientific ethics and the importance of oversight in research. As people moved through the exhibit, their expressions of curiosity mixed with concern mirrored my own journey. Discussions sparked amongst viewers, debates that Dr. Weiss had hoped for. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many expressing appreciation for the insight into a little-known chapter of scientific history and its ethical implications. The local media covered the event, and I was interviewed about my discovery and the journey that led to the exhibition. I emphasized the importance of learning from past mistakes and the role of ethical considerations in scientific advancement. The story resonated with many, leading to further discussions on local talk shows and in educational forums. As the interest grew, so did my sense of fulfillment. I had not only uncovered a hidden narrative, but had turned it into a tool for learning and awareness. The story of the bunker, Dr. Weiss and her team, was no longer a shadowed memory. It was a lesson etched into the conscience of a new generation, urging them to consider the moral dimensions of their own pursuits. The impact of the exhibition and the conversations it sparked went beyond what I had initially envisioned. It seemed that Dr. Weiss's story, her warnings, and the lessons from the bunker had found a receptive audience. As the exhibition came to a close, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, but also a newfound responsibility to continue sharing these important stories. A few weeks after the exhibition, I received a letter from a high school teacher who had attended with her students. She wrote about the discussions it had ignited in her classroom and how it had inspired her students to start a project on the ethics of modern scientific research. The students were eager to delve deeper into the historical context and ethical debates surrounding cutting-edge science. They wanted to contribute to a responsible future in whatever field they chose to pursue. Encouraged by this response, I decided to compile a documentary using the recordings, notes, and personal narratives I had collected. The focus was not only on the historical events of the bunker, but also on the broader implications for scientific ethics. I reached out to historians, ethicists, and scientists, gathering their insights to weave a comprehensive narrative. As the documentary took shape, I kept in constant communication with Dr. Weiss. She was initially hesitant about being directly involved, but eventually agreed to provide a recorded interview. Her first-hand account and reflective wisdom provided a poignant conclusion to the documentary, bridging past and present concerns in scientific research. The premiere of the documentary was held at the local community center, inviting the same mix of academics, students, and locals who had attended the exhibition. The room was filled with anticipation as the lights dimmed and the first images flickered on the screen. Dr. Weiss's voice filled the room, her steady, aged timbre recounting the early days of the project, the hopes they harbored, and the somber lessons learned. The discussion that followed the screening was vibrant and thoughtful. Questions were raised about current research practices, the role of government oversight, and how the public could be more actively involved in ethical debates. The consensus was clear. The past must inform the future, and continuous dialogue was essential in steering the course of scientific endeavor responsibly. Motivated by the success of the documentary, I facilitated its distribution to schools, libraries, and at various academic conferences. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many educators expressing gratitude for the resource that could aid in teaching critical thinking and ethical decision-making in science. Months later, as I reflect on this journey, from discovering the forgotten bunker to sharing its dark secrets and the resulting dialogue, I realize the power of curiosity paired with responsibility. The legacy of the bunker and its ill-fated research project now serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the ethical boundaries that should guide all human endeavors. In sharing this story, I hope to inspire others to approach the unknown, not just with the thrill of discovery, but with the wisdom of hindsight. As for me, my next adventure awaits. But this time, I carry with me the lessons of the past, ready to apply them to the mysteries of the future.